The sky above Epsilon Eridani 4 blazed with fire and chaos. Just hours earlier, the colony of Novan had awoken under clear skies and twin suns, ordinary, calm, and hopeful. Now, all of that had been ripped away in an instant. The Morali warships had arrived without warning, massive dark leviathans that eclipsed the suns as they descended from orbit, casting shadows across the colony like an omen. Their arrival hadn't been preceded by any declaration or transmission. They simply appeared silent, methodical, and armed to the teeth. The moment their positions locked into an attack formation, all hell broke loose. Inside the colonies. Command Center, Lara Carson, the colony's administrator, sprinted through the narrow corridors, her boots pounding against the metal floor as emergency sirens shrieked overhead. Her breath came in sharp bursts, but her focus remained razor-sharp. She had conducted hundreds of drills, planned dozens of evacuation protocols, but all of that paled in comparison to the reality crashing down around them now. As she burst into the main control room, the air smelled of hot circuits and fear. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. All around her, screens displayed feeds from the outer settlements, fields ablaze, homes crumbling, civilians scattering. Keith Brown, her security chief and a proud Navanan, stood near the tactical table. His normally vibrant blue skin had gone pale, the shimmering speckles on his face nearly white with stress. 6 confirmed Morali destroyers, he said grimly. 12 support vessels. They've already neutralized our orbital defenses. Ground assaults have begun in sectors 3 and 4. Lara steadied herself by gripping the edge of the console. Her knuckles turned white. The Morali Empire wasn't known for conquest. They were known for erasure. They didn't build empires. They leveled civilizations, stripped worlds bare, and moved on. "Comes?" she asked. Maria Das, their communications officer, didn't look up as her fingers flew over her console. "Local planetary channels still functioning," she said. "But they've jammed all outbound signals. No messages getting past atmosphere." "We need to reach the Galactic Concord," Lara muttered. "The nearest military response unit is in the Proxima system," Keith said, pulling up a map. "Even if we get through, they're 4 days out, minimum. Too far, much too far. By then, Novan would be a crater. The quantum beacon," Lara whispered. The room went still. That phrase spoken aloud sent a ripple of unease through the team. The quantum beacon was a forbidden failsafe, one of the most powerful technologies ever developed by the Concorde. It could pierce subspace and transmit an instant distress call to every major system in the galaxy. But the energy it used was so vast, it would make their command center glow like a star to enemy sensors. "If we activate it," Keith began cautiously. "They'll know exactly where we are," Lara finished. "I know." She looked around at her team. They had built this colony from the ground up. 30,000 Navanans had poured their hearts into making this red world home. She couldn't let them be wiped out without at least calling for help. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel," she ordered. "Get them into the underground shelters, now." Through the reinforced windows, she saw fire spreading across the valley. Explosions lit the horizon. Far away, Morali landing craft touched down in neat formations, discharging waves of infantry and massive auto-harvesters. "They're repositioning," said Sam Wilson, their tactical officer. "Looks like they're preparing for wide-range bombardment." Lara clenched her teeth. She turned to Maria. "Activate the beacon." Maria hesitated only a second, then nodded and began the sequence. The beacon's charging core hummed like a pulse within the walls, its frequency slowly climbing to a painful pitch. "Transmission parameters?" Maria asked, sweat dripping down her temple. "Standard distress protocol," Lara said. "Include visuals and data on Morali fleet strength, surface activity, and casualties." And include that the signal passed through Sector 8197, Keith added. Lara blinked. That's human space. Why? Protocol requires any Concord member in range to be notified, he replied. Even if they can't help, we cover all bases. Lara exhaled. Humans were recent members new to spaceflight, limited infrastructure. But rules were rules. Include it. She confirmed that the beacon reached full charge. The walls vibrated with energy. Warming lights flashed crimson. The console screens flared as power surged to the beacon core. Beacon ready, Maria said. Another explosion rocked the structure. A deafening boom followed. The lights cut out for several seconds before backup systems kicked in. Do it, Lara ordered. Maria pressed the button. A surge of light rippled outward, followed by a blast wave that made the entire room groan. The pulse shot through subspace fast, unrelenting, and encoded with a single message. Novan is under siege. Help us. Signal sent, Maria confirmed. But they know. More alerts began flashing. A red one stood out. Direct hit east wing, Sam said. They've zeroed in on our power readings. They're coming for the command center, Keith added, grabbing a rifle from the wall. Lara stood tall, brushing ash from her uniform. Begin data purge. Evacuate essential staff to fallback stations. All around her, personnel moved with frantic efficiency. They knew this might be their last hour. She turned to the tactical display one last time. It showed the Morali fleet swarming like a nest of hornets, methodical and cold. The pulse from the quantum beacon was gone, now racing across subspace to the wider galaxy. But Lara knew the truth. Help would come. Just not in time. The colony was already lost. Converting his clicking speech into standard. Galactic Common. Our nearest rapid response fleet is currently 4 days from the Epsilon Eridani system, a wave of concerned. Murmurs as swept through the chamber. Everyone knew what that meant. By the time they'll arrive, the colony would be destroyed. Can we not send a faster ship? Asked Representative Kalsa of the Tone Federation. Her feathered crest rose in agitation. Surely. We have something that can get there sooner. Admiral Tan shook his head. Our fastest scout ships could arrive in 2 days, but they carino weapons capable of engaging Mali destroyers from the highest tier. An ancient voice spoke. Representative Zal of the Folian race leaned forward, his wrinkled face barely visible beneath his ceremonial hood. The Folians were among the oldest species in the Concord, respected for their wisdom. The distress signal would have passed through Sector 8197Z, noted. Human space. There was a moment of puzzled silence before nervous laughter broke out among several representatives. The humans said Defense Minister Gora, they can barely reach their own moon with their primitive technology. This wasn't entirely fair. Humans had developed faster than light travel, which was why they had been granted provisional membership in the Concord 3 years ago, but their ships were slow and few in number. Earth had only established 2 small colonies beyond their home system. Minister Gora is right, Admiral Tan said. The humans have no military presence outside their immediate territory. They have fewer than 20 interstellar vessels total, and only 6 with any form of armament. There is simply not a factor in this situation. Representatives all nodded, slowly conceding the point. We should inform them officially. Nonetheless, said Representative Julia Anderson, the human delegate. She was one of only 3 humans in the entire Concord central government. My people would want to know, of course. Representative Anderson said, Hi, Chancellor Vex. His translucent tone rippled in what the more experienced delegates recognized as impatience. But we must focus on practical responses, Admiral. What preparations are being made for the refugees, if there are any? Someone muttered, not quietly. Enough. Admiral Tan activated a new displayware. Preparing refugee processing facilities and the Proxima system medical ships are all ready en route. But given typical Moroi tactics, he didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew the Moroi rarely left. Survivors, as the discussion continued. Representative Anderson quietly left her seat and moved to a private communication booth at the back of the chamber. She placed her hand on security scanner and waited for the booth to seal around her. Air hummed as privacy fields activated priority channel to Earth Central Command, she said. Clearly authorization Anderson 7 Delta 9. The communication system processed her request. After a few seconds, the screen lit up with the Earth insignia representative. Anderson said, a stern-faced man in a dark uniform. "This is an unexpected contact, General Clark. We have a situation," she said. "A distress signal from Epsilon Eridani IV AlienInvasion force. The colony is under heavy attack." The general's expression didn't change, but his posture straightens. Legally, Epsilon Eridani is within our response zone. Concord Fleet 1 Terra for 4 days, Anderson continued. The Council has essentially written off Fecaloni. General Clark was silent for a moment. "I understand. Thank you for the information, Representative. What will you do?" she asked. The general's expression softened slightly. "What we always do, Representative, the right thing." The connection ended. Anderson stood in the booth for a long moment before returning to the council chamber. The debate was still ongoing, with representatives arguing about resource allocation for the refugees and diplomatic responses to the Mori Empire. None of them noticed her small smile as she took her seat again. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. Admiral Garel stood on the command deck of the Moray flagship Merciless Harvest, watching with satisfaction as the bombardment of Epsilon Eridani 4 continued. The view screen showed orange blooms of destruction spreading across the surface of the blue-green planet. His scaled skin leaned under the harsh lights of the bridge as he turned to his second-in-command report. On the resource scans, he ordered. Commander Vrex bowed slightly. "The proper show of respect, excellent trusts. Admiral, initial readings show high concentrations of rare minerals in the northern continent. The biological material is being processed for fuel conversion. Biological material, a cold term for the bodies of the colonists. The Moray didn't waste anything, not even the species they destroyed." "How long until the extraction teams can begin full operations?" Grill asked. 24 hours, Admiral. "We need to finish the cleansing phase first." Grill nodded and turned back to the view screen. The colony's defense had been pathetically weak. Their orbital platforms had been destroyed in the first minutes of the attack. The ground forces had better equipment than expected, but nothing that could truly challenge Meralki's superiority. Now it was simply a matter of systematic destruction. "Admiral, we're picking up unusual readings," reported the sensor officer. Suddenly Grill frowned. "What kind of readings?" "Energy signatures, sir. Coming from the direction of Sector 8197. Grill consulted his data pad. "That is the empty sector. Nothing there but a primitive species with minimal space travel." "Yes, sir, but these readings." The officer looked confused. "They're moving faster than anything in our database." "A sensor malfunction," Grill said dismissively. "Run a diagnostic." "Yes, Admiral." The officer turned back to his console while Grill returned his attention to the bombardment. The planet's atmosphere was starting to show signs of the firestorms that would soon rage across its surface. "Perfect conditions for the harvesters, Admiral." The sensor officer's voice was higher now. "The readings are confirmed. Multiple objects approaching at speeds that impossible." "Interrupted, Commander Vex. Nothing moves that fast. 12 minutes to intercept." The officer continued, ignoring the rebuke. Gel felt a flicker of funes. Ray shields moved. The support vessels behind the capital ship's Thebridge crew rushed to comply as Gel studied the sensor readings himself. The objects were indeed moving at impossible speeds, faster than any known conquered technology. But that couldn't be right. "The only species in this region was dropping out of FTL," shouted the tactical officer. The view screen flickered as 7 sleek angular vessels appeared suddenly in the midst of the Mori fleet. Their design was unlike anything Garel had seen before. Black holes with sharp edges that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They were smaller than Rocky Destroyers but moved with incredible appreciation, positioning themselves between the Maui ships and the planet, who already demanded Gil. How did they get past our outer sensors? Unknown design, reported the tactical officer. No match in our database. Their broadcastings, the communications officer. All frequencies, all languages. Put it through, ordered Gel. A calm, steady voice filled the bridge, speaking perfect galactic stand. This is Captain Alan Brooks of the United Earth Naval Forces. You are engaged in an illegal assault on a galactic Concord colony. Cease hostilities immediately or be neutralized. The bridge fell silent. Commander Vrex was the first to recover Earth. The humans, he laughed a harsh sound. They barely have interstellar capability. Grill studied the ships on the screen more carefully. Their positioning was perfect, tactical now-assisted movement, and their speed. Open a channel, he ordered. When the connection was established, GU spoke with all the authority of a Morali admiral. This is Admiral Gerrill of the Morali Empire. You have entered a combat zone. Depart immediately or be destroyed. The response was immediate. This is your final warning, Admiral. Stand down your weapons and withdraw from this system. GR snarled. Target the lid. Ship full power to forward batteries. The Moray flagship's main weapons charged the energy building to levels that could shatter a small moon. The targeting systems locked onto the nearest human vessel. Fire, ordered Grow. The beam lanced out a spear of pure energy that should have vaporized the human ship instantly. Instead, just before impact, the ship simply moved. Not a slow, lumbering turn like Concorde vessels. Butin impossible twist that defied physics itself. The beam passed harmless. Lithra. Empty space. How Grill began, and then the humans opened fire. The first human shot didn't destroy the Molly ship. It didn't need to. A beam of blue-white energy lanced out from the human vessel, striking the Molly flagship with surgical precision. Beam didn't hit the main hull or weapon systems. Instead, it sliced through a specific section of the outairing, the shield generator. Shields down on sectors 3 through 7, shouted the Moray tactical officer, his voice rising in panic before Admiral Grill could respond. 2 more human ships fired, their weapons hit with impossible accuracy, targeting flagship's engine control and weapons guidance systems. The shots weren't designed to destroy. They were designed to disable. Return fire, Gel roared. The Moray fleet responded, unleashing a barrage that should have annihilated the smaller human vessels, but the humans moved like nothing Gel had ever seen. Their ships twisted and turned at angles that seemed to defy the laws of physics, evading most of the rocky fire. The few shots that connected with human ships splashed harmlessly against shields far more advanced than anything in the Moray arsenal. On Thecaman deck of the Ween Defender, Captain Alan Brooks sat calmly in his command chair. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency. There was no shouting, no panic, just the quiet hum of professionals at work. Status report, Brooks said. Lieutenant Sharon Jones looked up from her tactical display. 3 Morali destroyers disabled. No casualties reported on their side. Our shields holding at 92%. Brooks nodded. And the colony Femera ground forces are still active, sir, reported Commander Great Patterson from the operations console, but the orbital bombardment has stopped. Good. Signal the Jefferson and the Lincoln to break a fan. Begin dropship deployment. Focus on civilian extraction points. Yes, sir. Brooks turned his attention back to the main view screen. The Moroi were regrouping, forming a defensive line with their undamaged ships protecting the crippled vessels. They're preparing another attack, Lieutenant Jones warned. Let them come, Brooks said. Maintain current positions. The Moroi attack came on a wave of energy beams and missile fire. Once again, the human ships moved with unbelievable precision, dodging most of the incoming fire. Commander Patterson looked up from his console. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Moroi command ship. Put it through. Brooks ordered. Admiral Grill's face appeared on the screen. His scaled features were tight with fury. What are you? He demanded. These are not human capabilities. Brooks allowed himself a small smile. You're operating on outdated intelligence. Admiral, humanity has chosen to keep certain capabilities private and possible. Your species only achieved space travel a century ago, and yet here we are. Brooks replied calmly, I'll repeat my order. Stand down and withdraw from this system, or we will be forced to take more aggressive action. Grill snarled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Mali Empire does not retreat. All vessels concentrate fear on the human flagship. The transmission cut off. They've made their choice. Take out their propulsion systems. I want those ships dead in space. Yes, sir. What followed was unlike anything the Morali had experienced in centuries of warfare. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, as if they could predict every Mali maneuver before it happened. Their weapons fire struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling engines, weapons, and communication systems without destroying the vessels themselves. In the Concord Council chamber, the representative etched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded on their screens. The data was coming from long-range sensors, delayed by several minutes. This is impossible, whispered Admiral Tan. Representative Anderson stood quietly near the back of the chamber, her face betraying nothing. How are they doing this? Demanded Chancellor Vex. Where did these ships come from? No one had an answer. The tactical displays showed 3 more Morali ships, disabled, their engines, cold weapons offline, not destroyed, deliberately spared, but completely neutralized. On the Morali flagship, Admiral Gell watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically crippled. Ship after ship reported critical systems failures. Not a single human vessel had been seriously damaged. Admiral, said Commander Fra, his voice shaking. What are your orders? Grill stared at the tactical display. In just 15 minutes, the humans had disabled over half his fleet. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Admiral, before Gill could answer, the view screen lit up again. With Captain Brooks' face, Admiral Gurrell, the human, said calmly, your fleet is neutralized. I suggest you reconsider my offer while you still can. While the space battle raged above, the situation on the surface of Epsilon Eridani 4 was equally shocking to the Moroi Ground Forces commander. Jarek led his troops through the burning ruins of the main Novan settlement. His soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, shooting Gani survivors. They found the Novans were no match for Mali combat prowess. Their blue-skinned bodies littered the streets as Jarek's forces pushed toward the colony's resource center, set up their harvesting equipment in Sector 5. Jarek ordered over his comm unit, begin processing. As soon as his orders were interrupted by a strange sound overhead. Looking up, Jarek saw small black objects descending through the smoke-filled sky. They were too small to be ships he had moved, too precisely to be debris. Unknown objects entering our airspace, reported his tactical officer. They appear to be some kind of drop pods. Jarek signaled his troops to take defensive positions. The objects slowed as they approached the ground, landing with surprising gentleness in a clear area about 200 meters away. Prepare for engagement, Jarek ordered. Whatever they are, destroy them. His soldiers raised their weapons as the pods began to open. Jarek expected to see Concord peacekeepers or perhaps some unknown species. What emerged instead sent a wave of confusion through his ranks. Humans, just humans, but they were wearing something strange. Form-fitting suits of dark material with glowing blue lines running across them. These are the primitives from Sector 8197, said his second-in-command with a laugh. This will be over quickly. Sharuk wasn't so sure. The humans were deploying with unusual discipline, moving into formation with practiced ease. He counted only 30 of them against his force of over 300. Morali warriors opened fire. He ordered. The Morali weapons blazed, sending streaks of energy toward the human positions. The humans didn't scatter or panic. Instead, the air around them shimmered as personal shield systems activated. Technology the Morali had believed was still theoretical. Fenth humans began to move. Their suits clearly enhanced their physical abilities, allowing them to sprint at speeds that matched even the naturally athletic Mauki. They dodged between buildings and rubble with unnatural grace flanking them positions before Jarek could adjust his strategy. Human weapons were equally surprising. Compact energy rifles that cut through Mori armor with ease, but most shocking was their obvious restraint. The humans were firing at legs and arms, deliberately avoiding kill shots and possible fallback to secondary positions Jarek ordered as his front line began to crumble. As his troops retreated, Jarek watched in disbelief as a single human soldier lifted a collapsed wall section weighing at least tons to free trapped Novan civilians. The human's powered suit glowed brighter at the joints as it amplified his strength to impossible levels. Across Thekkaloni, similar scenes were playing out. Small teams of humans were systematically securing key area, establishing medical evacuation points, and engaging Raleigh forces with overwhelming tactical superiority. At Thekkaloni's main medical center, a human squad led by Lieutenant Patrick Whitehead established a defensive perimeter around hundreds of wounded Novan. The Moroi had surrounded the building, determined to eliminate all survivors as per their standard protocol. "They're coming again," warned Sergeant Kimberly Lee, checking her weapons charge, "at least 60 of them." This time Lieutenant White nodded calmly. His squad consisted of just 12 soldiers, but they had already repelled 2 Morali assaults. "Connor, how's our shield holding up?" White asked Private Jeff. Connor checked the portable shield generator they had. "Deployed 70%, sir. It'll hold for another wave." The lieutenant tapped his communication unit. "All units, prepare for contact. Remember, non-lethal if possible. We want prisoners, not bodies." As the Morali charged the position, the humans responded with coordinated fire, their weapons set to stun when possible. 3 humans moved to higher positions, providing covering fire, while the others engaged in close quarters combat. Inside the Medical Center, Dr. Lisa Harris worked frantically to save Novan lives. She had never treated alien physiology before today, but her medical suit was feeding her information about Novan biology in real time, guiding her actions. More incoming wounded, called a human medic as soldiers carried an injured Novanans. A small Novan child looked up at Dr. Harris with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you the help he said would never come in time?" the child asked in broken Galactic Standard. Dr. Harris smiled as she applied a healing gel to the child's injured arm. "Yes," she said simply. "We're here now." 3 hours after the first human ships arrived, the battle for Epsilon Eridani 4 was over. The Moray fleet hung motionless in space, disabled but largely intact. On the planet's surface, the last pockets of Morali resistance had surrendered, faced with the impossible choice between yielding or fighting an enemy they could not defeat. Admiral Grell stood in his flagship's conference room, his scales dulled with fatigue and shock. Across from him sat Captain Alan Brooks, flanked by 2 human officers. Neither side was armed, a gesture of trust that Grell found almost as surprising as the human victory. "Your terms?" Grell asked simply. Brooks slid a data pad across the table. "All Morali forces will withdraw from this system. Your wounded will be treated and returned to you. Your ships will be repaired enough for safe travel back to our territory, but weapon systems will remain offline." Ree blinked slowly. "Femirali equivalent of surprise. You're letting us go?" "Yes." "Why? You have won. By the rules of war, our lives and ships are yours to claim." Brooks leaned forwards lightly. "Those aren't our rules, Admiral." On the planet below, human drop ships continued to land, bringing medical teams, engineers, and relief supplies. Within hours, they had established field hospitals in every major settlement and begun distributing food and clean water to the survivors. Director Lara Carson, her uniform torn and dirty, watched in amazement as human teams worked with incredible efficiency. She stood outside the colony's main administration building, now serving as a coordination center for relief efforts. As a human officer approached her director, Carsonium Commander Lavra Bennett, Humanitarian Response Team. Carson shook the offer at him, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "How did you get here so fast?" she asked. "The nearest Concord forces were days away." Commander Bennett smiled. We were closer than you thought. Earth maintains forward operating bases near all major Concord colonies just quietly. But the Concord report said humans had limited space capabilities. Yes, Bennett agreed. That's what. The report said before Carson could ask more questions. A small Novan child ran up to Bennett, tugging at her uniform. The commander knelt down to eye level with the child. What can I do for you? She asked gently. My mother needs medicine. The child said, the blue doctors don't have the right kind. Bennett nodded seriously. Let's go find your mother. As the commander walked away with the child, Carson turned to see a group of human engineers already working to restore power to the colony's damaged grid. In the distance, she could see medical tents where human doctors treated Novan and Rocky wounded side by side. 4 days later, when the Galactic Concord Rapid Response Fleet finale, they found a fully operational relief effort already underway. The Morrow fleet had departed under escort from 2 human vessels. Temporary shelters house displaced colonists and reconstruction of critical infrastructure had begun. Admiral Tan beamed down with a team of Concord officials expecting to find devastation. Instead, he was greeted by Director Carson and Captain Brooks in a functioning command center. This unexpected, Admiral Tan said, looking around at the busy operations room where humans and Novenans worked side by side. The humans arrived within an hour of our distress signal, Carson explained. They drove off the Malky and immediate Liban rescue operations. Admiral Tan turned to Captain Brooks. How your fleet was never reported to have this capacity. Brooks smiled politely. There are many things about humanity that haven't been reported. Admiral, in a quiet corner off the command center, Commander Bennett was speaking with a Concord medical officer. Your treatment protocols for Novan physiology are remarkably advanced, the Concord doctor noted. We weren't aware humans had such knowledge. Bennett shrugged. We learn quickly, and your field surgery techniques, I've never seen anything like them. The survival rates you've achieved are beyond our standard expectations. We've had a lot of practice, Bennett said quietly. The doctor looked at her curiously. With Novan physiology with trauma, Bennett corrected, humans have a long history of treating battlefield injuries. Outside, more Concord ships were arriving in orbit. News of what had happened at Epsilon Eridani was spreading throughout the galaxy. The story was always the same. A distress signal was sent and humans served. Humans with technology and capabilities far beyond what anyone had believed possible. What confused the Concord representatives most wasn't the human sudden display of military power. It was how they used that power, not for conquest or revenge, but for protection and healing. 1 week after the Battle of Epsilon Eridani 4, the Galactic Concord High Council convened an emergency session. The circular chamber was packed beyond capacity as representatives from every member species gathered to discuss what many were now calling the human question. High Chancellor Vex called the session to order, his tentacles rippling with barely controlled agitation. We are here to determine how the humans managed to conceal their true capabilities from Concord for 3 years, he announced, and more importantly, what those capabilities actually are. The chamber erupted in voices as dozens of representatives tried to speak at once. Amal San finally gained the floor. Our investigation has revealed disturbing facts, he said. The human ships that engaged the Moroi do not match any vessels in our official registry. They appear to be part of a separate fleet that humans never disclosed during their provisional membership application. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Concealing military assets was a serious violation of Concord membership protocols. Furthermore, San continued, the technology displayed by these vessels exceeds anything in known space. Their propulsion systems, weapons capabilities, and defensive measures are at least 200 years beyond current Concord standards. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank, and Chancellor Vex turned to Representative Julia Anderson, who sat calmly amid the storm of accusations. Representative Anderson, What explanation does Earth offer for this deception? Anderson stood, her expression composed. The Earth government has authorized me to introduce someone who can better address your concerns. She gestured to a figure standing in the shadows near the entrance. With the Council's permission, I present Ambassador Richard Nelson of the United Earth Government, a tall, distinguished human with gray hair walked to the center of the chamber. Unlike Anderson, who wore the blue robes of a Concord representative, Nelson wore a simple black uniform with a single silver pin on the collar. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," Nelson said, his voice carrying easily through the large space. "I understand your confusion and concern. When humanity joined the Concord, we did withhold certain information about our technological capabilities. For this, I offer no excusable explanation. Please proceed, Chancellor." Vex said stiffly. Nelson nodded. "Humanity's development followed a different path than most species in the Concord. While many of you achieved space travel before resolving your internal conflicts, Earth unified only after centuries of warfare." He touched a small device on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber floor, showing scenes from human history, army escalation across different eras from ancient battles to modern conflicts. Our history is marked by almost constant warfare. Nelson continued. This drove rapid technological advancement in certain areas, particularly weapons, defensive systems, and medical treatment for combat injuries. The display changed to show human ships and soldiers, their capabilities far beyond what had been presented during Earth's admission to the Concord. "When we finally achieved global peace and encountered other species, we made a decision," Nelson explained. "We would present ourselves not as we were, but as we wished to be seen, a young, somewhat naive species still finding its way in the galaxy." "You lied," stated a Folian representative bluntly. "We omitted," Nelson corrected. "We showed you our civilian technology, our cultural achievements, our scientific understanding. We simply didn't show you our military capacity." "Why?" demanded Admiral Sean. Nelson's expression softened. "Because of how others have reacted out history when discovering a militarily advanced neighbor. Fear leads to preemptive action. We wanted you to know us as people before you knew us as a potential threat." The chamber was silent as the representatives processed this information. It was representatives all who finally spoke, his ancient voice carrying unexpected weight. "And your unified planetary government was that also hidden from us?" Nelson nodded. "Most Concord species achieved unified planetary rule only after centuries of space exploration and external threats. Humanity unified through internal struggle, reaching consensus through conflict rather than necessity." Chancellor Vex leaned forward. "What else have you concealed?" "Ambassador, much," Nelson admitted, "but not out of malice. We simply needed to be certain we would be accepted as equals rather than feared as conquerors." The holographic display changed again, showing the human relief efforts on Epsilon Eridani 4 soldiers, helping injured Novenans, engineers rebuilding infrastructure, doctors treating the wounded regardless of species. 2 months after the events at Epsilon Eridani 4, the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The Galactic Concord had been thrown into turmoil by the revelations about humanity's true nature. Some species called for Earth's expulsion from the Concord. Others suggested a military alliance. A few even proposed putting restrictions on human space travel. In the end, the Concord did what large political bodies often do when faced with unprecedented situations. They formed a committee. The Human Integration Commission met in a neutral space station orbiting a dead star far from any inhabited worlds. Representatives from 12 major Concord species sat across from a human delegation led by Ambassador Richard Nelson. "Your proposal is unusual," said Chancellor Vex, who had been appointed to lead the commission. "We believe it's the best path forward," Nelson replied. "Earth will share its medical technology, offensive systems, and agricultural innovations with the Concord. In return, we'll ask for full membership and participation in the Concord's defense." Planning Admiral Tan tapped a claw against the table. The problem, Ambassador, is trust. You concealed your capability essence. How can we be certain you aren't still hiding something you can't? Nelson said simply, just as we can't be certain that every Concord species has revealed all their capabilities. Trust must be built over time through actions, not words. The debate continued for hours with various representatives expressing concerns and demands. Through it all, Nelson remained calm, neither defensive nor apologetic. Meanwhile, on Epsilon Eridani IV, a more practical form of integration was taking place. Human engineers worked alongside Novan builders to reconstruct the colony. Felidist and human agricultural technology was being implemented, promising yields 3 times higher than before. THETAC and the colony's new medical center, Dr. Lisa Harris, was training Novan medical staff in advanced trauma care. The blue-skinned aliens watched with fascination as she demonstrated techniques developed over centuries of human warfare. Why share this knowledge with us? Asked a Novan doctor. Your species could dominate the galaxy with your technology. Dr. Harris looked up from the medical simulator. And then what? Rule through fear, stand alone against whatever comes next. That's not the future we want. Similar scenes played out across the colony, where humans freely shared their knowledge and skills without expectation of payment or political advantage. It was this more than any official declaration that began to change how the galaxy viewed humanity. Back at the Concord headquarters, the final vote on Earth status was about to take place. Thousands of representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for what would be a historic decision. Chancellor Vex called for order as Ambassador Nelson waited calmly at the speaker's podium. Before we vote, Vex announced, we have received a communication from Epsilon Eridani IV. Director Carson wishes to address the council. The main screen lit up, showing Lara Carson standing in the rebuilt colony center. Behind her, humans and Novanans worked side by side. Honorable Leprocestus, she began. I understand your fear of humanity. 2 months ago, I might have shared it, but I have seen these humans not just fight for us, but bleed for us, work for us, teach us. They had the power to conquer, but chose to protect. They had knowledge they could have sold, but chose to share. She paused, looking directly at the camera. What arrived at our colony when we sent our distress signal was not the horror Manyoff you now fear. What arrived was humanity at its best, powerful, yes, but guided by compassion rather than conquest. If that horrifies you, perhaps the problem lies not with them but with your expectations. The chamber was silent when the transmission ended. After a moment, Representative Zoll stood, his ancient frame rising slowly. I have lived long enough to see many species join the Concord, he said. None have entered under such unusual circumstance, but perhaps that is fitting. Humans are an unusual species. They developed weapons that could destroy worlds, then chose not to use them. They achieved power to conquer, then chose to protect. They mastered violence, then chose peace. He looked at Ambassador Nelson. What horrifies us is not just your capacity for destruction, but the realization that we've misunderstood you from the beginning. You are not simply warriors or diplomats. You are both, and that makes you unlike any species we have encountered. Vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Concord with special responsibility for rapid response to distress calls throughout the galaxy. As Nelson left the chamber, Admiral San approached.